Live on channel 889 on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
Right, well, now we're talking something very interesting about cultural appropriation. And it's interesting because we're not talking about the cultural appropriation necessarily and exclusively of those who are completely not in the culture. For example, there's a singer from the 90s, one of my favorite girls, right? Because of what she represented at the time, which was freedom and kind of a punk state of being and going against the rules and regulations that we're put under as women. Her name is Gwen Stefani. And Gwen used to pretend she was a Jamaican. She went through her Jamaica time. And then she went through her Harajuku time, her Japanese time. And what I mean by going through those times is replicating hairdos, wearing outfits, using Harajuku girls as props, really. Like there'd just be a crew of people who follow her. And then putting Indian bindis on her face. That was real cultural appropriation, which we're waking up to in a lot of ways in this generation, and having really serious conversations about what happens when your favorite artists or filmmakers or etc., put another person's identity on as a sort of mask or as a sort of display, and how problematic that can be. Then, boom. Have you heard of the Zulu parade in New Orleans? I hadn't before. A month ago, this pops up, right? And it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. There's a Zulu parade in New Orleans, or New Orleans as they call it, where people are parading in what looks like cartoon versions of isiZulu attire. There's a bit of blackface in there, which is problematic. And then it led us to think about, hey, but as South Africans, are we appropriating from each other? So say from KZN, there's an isiZulu woman who comes to Gauteng and she looks around at her friend's Setswana attire and she likes it so much more. And she decides she's going to blend the different fabrics from different ethnic groups. Maybe, she likes the headdress from one and from the Sotho culture, the blanket, whatever it is. So the opinions are divided here. Is it a celebration of each other's respect, right? If I go out and I purchase the very, very colorful Shivenda or Tsonga outfits, Kele Mosotho. And if you go out and you wear a Mudianyewe because you just think it's so cool for the occasion, and you are not from the Basotho culture, is it appropriation? Who gets to say who wears what and who's allowed to wear what? When does cultural pride start to feel like cultural theft? Even within the continent. And within the continent is a big thing, with much of what is done in Southern Africa with Northern Africa's norms and outfits and attire. So let's unpack it. Identity politics, self-expression as Africa. Are we celebrating each other? Is there really a fine line between cross-cultural respect and also then erasure? Let's explore it with our cultural expert, Professor Musa Xulu. Thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you, Pabi, and good afternoon to yourself and your listeners.
So when you hear about this as a person who thinks a lot, has written a lot and has published a lot about culture and cultural expression, can you make the differentiation for us between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation?
Well, cultural appropriation happens when you take the cultural values, practices of people without their permission, firstly, and secondly, pretend that it is authentic when in a sense it's not authentic, and produce a washed down version of a people's culture without recognizing them in their authentic format. It usually leads to a lot of anger from the original owners of the culture, and for most of the time it happens in cultural performances. Cultural appreciation happens when there was a class at university which was called music appreciation, for example, where you sit down and simply look at the culture of a people and appreciate its various elements and express your positive outlook towards it and wish even to promote it to other people. Now, it happens a lot, for example, where films are made about certain people, the Zulu, or films like that, Shaka Ilembe. Usually it starts with cultural appreciation, although maybe the content itself may lead to some kind of despondency from the cultural insiders. But when people appreciate the culture, they usually do more than just watching it in exhibition, and sometimes even take it to other parts of the world. And present it as it is, authentically. It happens a lot, for example, here, where some women dancers, avail to tourist guest houses and hotels, and they perform Zulu music, and the audience appreciates and clap hands. And so on. That appreciation is usually positive.
Okay.
That's appreciation. Appropriation is negative.
Appropriation is negative. So let's then talk very quickly about this thing in New Orleans in America. So they call themselves the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club of New Orleans, and they host an annual Mardi Gras, often called the Zulu Parade. Now, it's sparked significant controversy because when you look at these pictures, people are in blackface, which perhaps you can help us understand why is so offensive. Many of us know, but it's good to hear from you. And also, they're not really wearing anything. There's some who are wearing a distorted version of an isiZulu attire, yes, but others are wearing. I don't know where these countries come from. It actually could be a Nigerian headdress, some Jamaican. It's very interesting why they would even come up with a parade like that. And for the first time, I think, in a long time, because of social media, the whole of the world got to see it and went, stop. That's cultural appropriation.
Yeah, no. They started this in 1916. And so 2016, it was 100 years. I think the intentions are good. It's just that they have not really taken any time to research authentic Zulu culture. And sometimes there is also this problem with especially the USA. When you go there, they think that Africa is a country and that we all live in this one country, and there's no difference between blacks in Nigeria and blacks in South Africa. And so they'll mix and mix, but it's absence of wanting to know more about the culture, simply saying, because Zulu has been, I think in 1916 was 100 years since Shaka rose to power. So there would have been lots of maybe media reports about 100 years of Shaka, the emperor, and so on. And then they became interested in what the newspapers were reporting. And then they decided to form this very interesting, the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club of New Orleans. They have been doing it for over 100 years. I don't think that they have tried to look at the authentic side of Zulu culture in terms of costumes and imagery, in terms of identity, in terms of how people dress, and in terms of the various different times when people dress up as Zulus, because it's not always the same kind of attire all the time. It's got seasons, it's got male and female gender, it's got all sorts of things and it gets associated with the rites of passage and wars and so on. You dress according to
Yes.
a certain preconceived pattern and decorum that you
Yes.
cannot just decide that I want to do it as I like. So I think the anger comes from there. And then the black faces, of course, are usually seen as mockery of black people. Sometimes even white people do this from time to time, and they come up with black faces. It's a mockery because actually Zulus are not as dark as this, but it's an exaggeration for attention and for parade, reasons.
Yeah.
But in reality, when you do these things and you want to run away from appropriation, you start with research. It's not late for them to consult lots of texts on Zulu cultural heritage,
Yeah.
on Zulu attire, on Zulu fashion and dress codes.
And so is that part of the appreciation? So if I am a Mosotho girl and I really like Iskolo or whatever I like, and I just go out and I get it, not understanding that maybe this is for only women who are going through this certain time in their life, or it's only ordained to the royalty, etc., and so forth. It's about doing your research and then finding out if it is then appropriate for you to wear it, so that when you do, you're appreciating the beauty of it, yes, but also the culture behind it.
Yes, because what you see culturally, even in languages, is tip of an iceberg. Is a display of lots of ideas and knowledge that are underneath. Sometimes and most of the times are not even spoken. But the cultural insiders know the symbols, and they know that at this age of your growing up, this is what is appropriate for you to dress up.
Yes.
At this stage of your and you also embed your identity in your costumes.
Yeah.
So, and you'll find that, for example, if you go to KZN, the women of Msinga, they dress up differently from the women here along the coast, even in terms of traditional attire. So it's not just your personal identity, but it's also the identity of your region,
Yes.
your district, where you come from, but also maybe even the identity of your clan, where you'll find that certain clans, for example, will perform certain cultural, even, incisions on their faces and so on, just to identify themselves and then dress up in a particular way. And even when it comes to language, there are certain words that suddenly are prohibited among the Zodis or the Zulus or the Buthelezis, although they form part of the broader Zulu and linguistic family. So a research can help these people because I think the intentions are good, but the absence of knowledge is making it look more like appropriation than appreciation.
Okay. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Professor Musa Xulu, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We do need more time to talk about it to make sure that, even when we come to work on that day in September, the only day we'll wear cultural things. I'm not offending you, Nyaka Lotefo, by wearing your cultural or your tribe's attire. Just because it's that day, or, at the moment, we're really moving into making everything fashion, and we're modernizing and creating fashion out of things that were the cultural attire of before. And somebody asked me here on X, who owns culture? Well, absolutely. I think that is so important to ask. And can culture evolve? Is culture the kind of thing that is dynamic, particularly in how you display it on your body? We'll keep talking about issues like this right here on Power 98.7.